Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almasian. I forgot my name. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you already watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. I'm very happy to be joined by Firas Modad, a geopolitical expert. It is always good to have him on his show and listen to his insight and valuable analysis about what's going on nowadays in West Asia or in the Middle East. How are you doing, my friend, today?
I'm well, Habibi. All the better for seeing you. I wish this war wasn't happening, but,
Indeed, and especially also in your country, Lebanon, there is a lot ongoing, guys, also in Lebanon. The entire region, it seems like on the edge. We're going to cover a variety of topics. We will keep this flow of conversation just natural. Let's see what pops up. I will also check from now to then also what's going on, breaking news, because every moment there is something new ongoing, so we could also discuss everything. Firas, my friend, in the past 2 weeks, we have seen major strikes against Iran, one of which was against the gas fields. And then Donald Trump came and said that this is the end. We're not going to strike Iran's liquefied natural gas fields any longer after Iran retaliated against the Qatari liquefied natural gas fields, and those are the same field but separated between Iran and Qatar. And then Donald Trump threatened to bomb the energy or the electricity and the power, let's say, base of Iran. And then he backed off again and said that he will give 5 days or so. However, today, it has been reported by several major media outlets that the energy infrastructure in Iran's Isfahan, it's called Khormaz Shahr, targeted during U.S.-Israeli offensive, and this is according to Iranian media. And also the Iranian media says that their energy infrastructure is being attacked by both sides. It seems to me that the U.S. is sending conflicting signals to Iran. And now that we have this situation that Iran's, let's say, energy infrastructure has come again under an attack, how do you interpret these conflicting signals coming from the U.S. and then at the same time, like the moment Trump says something and 5 minutes later they're attacking Iran's energy infrastructure?
Two possibilities. Either the Pentagon wants to make this even bigger, or certain decision makers in the Pentagon want to make this a little bit bigger. Or I think more likely the Israelis want to make sure that Trump doesn't chicken out in the middle of the war and end the war now. And I think the second explanation is more probable. I think that the reason Trump backed down was because the Iranians demonstrated that when they want to hit something, nobody can stop them. And the most important strike in terms of output taken offline was the strike on Qatar.
Yes.
But the most important strategic strike was the attack on Yanbu, on the Red Sea in Saudi Arabia, which this kind of thing, it happens a couple of times and then the Saudis cannot load oil anymore. And that causes a much bigger disaster in the global energy markets. So Trump seems to be trying to manage the global market by saying, no, we're not going to go into an exchange that leads to Iran blowing up all the power infrastructure in the Gulf, which they obviously can do. And remember, after the attack on South Pars, they also attacked Haifa successfully, which was another big demonstration. And now the new missiles that we saw overnight landing in Tel Aviv, the splintering warhead, essentially, they don't know if it's a cluster, if it's three separate warheads. They don't seem to know what it is yet. But what these are demonstrating is that the Iranians can hit their targets. And so what's happened is that the Iranians have taken a lot of punishment. There's no denying that. But they are still able to get the targets that they want. And that has forced Trump to back down a little bit. But it looks like the Israelis want to make sure that the escalation continues.
And where this escalation leads, basically, like what is the strategy of Israel? We spoke about decapitation, regime change. This has failed. So I'm from the outside. I'm zooming out, and I'm trying to understand. Then what is the strategy if your main strategy has failed? Then what is the plan B here? Is to cause more economic suffering in the region, to bring everyone into this conflict? What is the strategy of Israel in this case, basically?
For the Israelis, if they create chaos everywhere, they believe that they benefit. And one of the countries to look at, they believe that now, if they keep escalating, maybe they can set Iran back by 20 years, and that delays the problem. But there are two things. The first thing is that they're already talking about Turkey being the next target. and they already are trying to mobilize against Turkey, which is an insane idea to begin with. An absolutely insane idea to begin with. The second thing is that they're putting Egypt in an economically impossible position.
Yes.
The Egyptian energy import bill has tripled. And they are one of the most sensitive countries to food prices, which are also facing an issue because of the fertilizer crisis that's coming from the Gulf. For Egypt, they might have to choose something crazy, which they haven't done in recent years, which is decide, okay, we have to go into this conflict, and it doesn't matter what the costs are. Because that is the only way to preserve Egyptian interests and to preserve Egypt as a state. Because unless the Israelis are constrained, they are going to keep on attacking the Egyptian national interest.
Yes.
And we've already seen that in Libya with the partition, de facto partition of Libya, and the UAE backing to Khalifa Haftar, and the UAE is always operating as an Israeli proxy, essentially. And in Sudan, and the backing of the RSF against the army, the Egyptian army naturally prefers the Sudanese army, warts and all. And so they're putting Egypt in a situation where, okay, do you just suffer an economic crisis and collapse? Or do you try to fight your way out of this and odds be damned? And for Egypt, it's a country of 120 million people going against a country of 10 million people, 8 million Jewish people maybe. The odds are not exactly in Israel's favor in this, because this kind of move by the Egyptians can simply overturn the entire balance in the Middle East and force the West to go back to considering the Egyptian national interest, which under the current hegemony does not happen.
And if Egypt considers its national security in this case, shouldn't Syria be part of the calculation for Egypt? Usually in the region, we used to say that the national security of Syria is from the national security of Egypt. And in this case, it is quite clear after the Jolani has established his regime in Damascus, all the Egyptian mainstream media outlets, and we know there is no freedom of press in Egypt. It's all controlled under the mukhabarat, under the secret services. And they are all they're badly speaking about Jolani day and night, and they haven't really normalized him like in the Arabic world. Egypt has been in opposition of the Jolani regime until this moment. So, do you see Egypt playing any active role in bringing back Syria under the Arabist umbrella instead of going and proceeding to the Islamist umbrella?
I don't think this is a choice that they have. I think they will pick up Islamist sentiment themselves and cast this as an Islamic duty. And in doing so, put the Gulf states in an impossible position and put Jordan and Syria and Turkey in an impossible position where they have to rally behind Egypt. I don't see them, I don't see any credibility to Arabism, frankly. Yes. It's dead, it's buried, it's over. That's it.
So Islam,
exactly. Exactly. Islam is a different story. It is a living force. Religion is always a living force, even when it's in decline. And nothing revives it like battle.
Well, that is, I've been following the Egyptian popular base for quite some time, and I can see clear sentiments about this war. And it seems that they have been immune for now for the Gulf, let's say, animosity toward Iran. And they see it differently from a geopolitical perspective. We will see how Egypt reacts to this case, but I totally agree with you that they're pushing Egypt to an impossible position that Egypt could react sooner or later. But in this case, you also mentioned the UAE, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, and I've been reading in the past 2 days that Saudi Arabia and the UAE are inching toward joining the US-Israeli war against Iran. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. So if we see the details, one, Gulf countries are getting tougher following persistent attacks. 2, Saudi Arabia has agreed to let American forces use its King Fahd air base. 3, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, MBS, is close to a decision to join the attacks. And 4, it is only a matter of time before the kingdom enters the war. This is an insider telling the Wall Street Journal. Now, I take these things always with a grain of salt. However, how much do you see there is a credibility and also logic behind Saudi Arabia and the UAE joining a war against Iran in this case?
Look, I think it was UN General Assembly Resolution 3314 or 3341, General Assembly, not Security Council, that defines aggression. And within the definition of aggression is letting your country be used by a second country to target a third, which is what the Saudis and the Emiratis and the Qataris have all been doing, and obviously Kuwait, Bahrain, etc., through the radar network that they have to defend the United States, through the basing rights, through the logistics that they provide, through pretty much everything that they do. So in a real sense, in a legal sense, they are already a belligerent. And they're getting attacked. Now, what do they have in terms of capability? The Saudis have some ballistic missiles, and they have a fleet of, I believe, 150 jets. The UAE has around 100 jets. They could activate those and try to engage in attacks. And I think the UAE has HIMARS systems as well, which can be fired across the Gulf on coastal targets. So they could participate, conceivably. But what they would lose then is so much bigger. Because the problem that all of these countries suffer from is the enormous concentration of their assets. Yani Saudi Arabia looks like a huge country, and it is physically. But if you knock out Abqaiq, which is where the processing of the oil happens for Saudi Arabia, that becomes disastrous. And the Houthi were able to do that with 4 drones. And if you repeatedly strike it, that will take years and years to rebuild. Without oil revenue, a country like Saudi Arabia is in very deep trouble for a very long time. So the vulnerability that they have is massive. Plus, there's Yemen to factor into the picture, where they've been training hundreds of thousands of people to engage in a ground war. And it looks to me like there's been a decision to keep Yemen's powder dry until later on in the game.
Yes.
And the involvement of the Gulf might be that moment of later on in the game. And now the United States is thinking about a ground campaign in Iran, which is obviously a suicidal idea. It's a country of 90 million people, enormous territory. Geographically, the country is designed like a fortress. And so going into Iran is a fool's errand. I mean, the people who have conquered Iran are the Muslims, Genghis Khan, and Alexander the Great, and back in the day, the Sumerians. This is a very small club. And the idea that this generation of American leaders would be part of that club is a bit laughable. It's not realistic at all.
When you say this generation, do you mean the political class in the United States and their intellectual and strategic capacity to understand what is going on in the world?
And this military. And this military. I mean, they're already saying that why are they talking about escalating to power? Because the Pentagon's target bank has run out, which is exactly what happened to Israel in the 2006 war in Lebanon. If the target bank has run out, what it means is that either they haven't been able to locate a bunch of the launchers, or the underground cities, the underground missile cities, have proven sufficiently resilient that they've struck them again and again, and they're still firing. And odds are it's a combination of both, because some of the online open source reporting is suggesting that the firing is moving a little bit towards the center, away from the west of Iran towards the center, which makes sense in 2 ways. Firstly, the older missiles would be concentrated in the West because they would have lower ranges. They are older missiles. And secondly, as they build out towards the center, they would naturally fortify more because this is harder to target by definition, given that these bombing runs require multiple refuelings as they are conducted. And last, if the Iranians receive some external air defense capability, and I'm not saying they don't have any, clearly they do, and there's been losses that the Americans have taken, but it's not adequate. And if they receive more accurate stuff from Russia or China, where are they going to initially deploy it? They're going to initially deploy it in the center. And so it makes sense to make sure that the missile cities in the center of the country are a lot more resilient. And it seems like they are. And it seems like the Iranians are able to strike targets at will, not at the same intensity as American bombing, not at the same intensity as the Israeli bombing. There are all kinds of limitations, but slowly they're depleting the reserve of interceptors, and they're surviving, and they're still able to strike the targets that matter when they want to, and they still have the Houthi card. So this isn't going well for the United States in any way. None of the objectives have been achieved. And the fact that Trump is now talking about negotiating with the Iranians, this is obviously to comfort the markets.
Is there negotiations?
It depends on who you believe. It depends on who you believe. I would suspect, I think that the honest truth is that there are messages being exchanged between Iran and the United States via intermediaries. So I actually spoke to Abdel Ati, the Egyptian foreign minister. And they are in contact with all kinds of other players in the region, including the Omanis. And obviously there would be an exchange of messages. Al-Akhbar's reporting is that there is no written proposal. And really, to end this, you need written proposals. You need to offer, what do you want? What do I want? Something that people can examine as opposed to just conversations. So if there are communications between the two sides, they are nowhere near the stage that ends this war. And one more point, the fact that the Saudis have allowed the use of King Fahd Air Base, King Sultan Air Base was being used by the Americans. That's why it got hammered. What the use of King Fahd means is that the Americans are being pushed out and out, further and further away from Iran, which protects the center because you need to refuel more times, and every time you refuel, you are more vulnerable. And the longer you have to go to conduct a bombing run, the more exposed you are, the more risk you take. So it seems that the Iranians are pushing out the US and making some bases obviously unusable. Udeid was evacuated before the war because they knew that it wasn't usable. King Sultan was being used for refueling.
Yes.
We don't know what kind of damage has been taken by the Jordanian bases because there's many information gaps. But it seems that there are hits that were scored there.
Yes.
So it seems that the Iranians are pushing out the US further and further away. And now one of the two aircraft carriers that were sent for this mission is back in Greece doing repairs. And if it's doing repairs, it's not conducting bombing runs. And so, plus they're using more stuff coming out of Romania, they're using more stuff coming out of Europe, they're using the B-1 out of Britain. Clearly, this isn't going well. Not that the Iranians aren't taking punishment, because depending on who the audience is, I get accused of being pro-American or pro-Iranian or pro-this or that. However, the Iranians are obviously taking enormous punishment, and Iran is being pushed into a situation where, as a nation state, it's having to fight as an insurgency in an asymmetric manner, which is not a good situation for any state to be in, by definition.
Oh, but when I followed what they have reported about these alleged negotiations yesterday, again, I'm going back now to the Wall Street Journal because this is what they reported. We don't have to believe everything they say, but
course.
they're reporting that Iran has submitted its demands, and those are the demands. One, Iran will control the Strait of Hormuz and will have the right to collect a toll of passage. Two, the US must provide firm guarantees of non-aggression against Iran in the future. Three, Israel must stop its aggression against Lebanon and Hezbollah. Four, the US must completely evacuate its bases in the Persian Gulf. Five, the US must pay financial compensation to Iran for the damage caused. I'm not claiming that those are accurate. All I'm saying is hypothetically, if those are the demands of Iran, it looks like they're not interested in a compromise at the current moment because Americans are not going to give these concessions because it means the end of the American hegemony in the region, the least to say. And this puts Israel in a great vulnerability and exposes its national security to all the players that Iran supports, including the main player, Iran, and the other non-state actors in the region. So this is very high-stake conflict that if you withdraw, if you accept a ceasefire now under such circumstances, America will be seen to the world as no longer this formidable player. And if they accept to continue the war, then the Strait of Hormuz will be closed for infinite time, and the global economy will be choked. I don't see a good exit for the United States from this.
Look, a couple of things to comment on here. The Wall Street Journal was also saying that the United States needs to send ground troops because otherwise American hegemony is over. This is insane. This can only be written by somebody who hasn't looked at a map of Iran, or who doesn't understand what maps mean. Because sending ground forces into Iran is an infinite quagmire. If you thought Afghanistan was bad, try Iran. Twice the size, several times the population. It's a disaster.
Let me show you the photo. This is the photo of the map of Iran, guys.
Yeah. So, like, if you wanted to build a country to look like a fortress, that's what you would do.
Yeah.
And the idea of securing the Persian Gulf, or the Strait of Hormuz by ground forces, just again, if you just go through the map, everything from Shabahar near the border with Pakistan to Jasak at the tip of the Gulf of Oman, that's a free firing zone. And then in the area itself, from Jasak through Bandar Abbas to the port that is on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz, that's a free fire zone. And then everywhere from there to Basra, literally to Basra, it's a zone from which the Iranians can fire as much as they want at any ship that passes by. So just the geography of the place explains why it's named the Persian Gulf.
Yes.
At every point, and by the way, where the Gulf is narrowest is where the Qatari exports come from, is where the Saudi exports come from, is where the Kuwaiti and Bahraini exports come from.
Yes.
In the part of the Gulf that's narrowest, which is to say the easiest to target by the Iranians. They've attacked a bunch of ships. I think 16, 20 ships have been attacked. But this is a small portion of what they can actually do. This is a portion of what they can actually do. And they have an open supply line to Russia and to China through the land border with Turkmenistan and through the Caspian. Because one of the terminuses of the Belt and Road is in Kazakhstan. So this is, at the end of the day, a terrible situation for the Iranians to be in. Their infrastructure is getting blown up. Their hospitals are getting blown up. Their core assets are getting blown up. Government buildings are getting blown up. This is not a good place to be. And the Israelis are not taking damage at the same proportion.
Yes.
But because of the size of Iran, the ability to absorb damage is much bigger. The Iranians can afford to lose 4 or 5 power stations. The Israelis have 4 or 5 power stations. That's the fundamental difference here.
And demographically also, the Iranians are more, let's say, they're wishing to die. Basically, if you see the difference of ideology between what the Shias believe in Iran and what the people believe in Israel, it's a high
The
contrast.
victory of blood over the sword, the notions of martyrdom, of Hosseini martyrdom, the notions of Karbala, these are things that animate the Iranian psyche in a particular way. Whereas in Israel, what animates them is essentially the preservation of their lives and vengeance. So it's a fundamentally different mindset that the two sides have. And I would argue that the Shia mindset is more resilient. So they have certain advantages, even though they are at a big disadvantage when it comes to air cover, when it comes to technology, when it comes to all kinds of things. But even then, with the newer missiles that we're seeing, I mean, they're maneuvering away from the interceptors. And when the Iranians said that they had this technology, everybody laughed and said, no, this is, the Iranians keep lying, they keep pretending, they're not telling the truth, etc. Well, clearly, maybe they don't have it in abundance, and that's why the rate of fire has fallen. But when it comes to the rate of fire, what you need to remember is that now the Iranians are in a holding pattern. Now the idea for Iran is we fire the minimum required to remind everybody that we're there and to punish where we want to punish and let the economic pain become the solution. The problem is that the American thinking could be that regardless of the economic pain, the Americans will recover faster because the American economy is quite adaptive. They have enormous natural resources. They have enormous wealth. They have Canada, which is a major oil producer, which can be slapped around into producing a lot more. They have Venezuela now, but these investments take years. Greenland potentially, but these investments take years to materialize.
Yes.
And the other side of the equation is that China isn't exactly not resilient. China throws up a coal plant every week. They throw up nuclear plants at a much higher rate than anyone else. And they have all of Central Asia waiting to be much further developed. And so the end of this war, depending on how it plays out, but it is going to mean that the Chinese are actually in an enormously strong position, much stronger than any of the other Asian countries. Because Japan has foolishly sanctioned Russia and sided with the United States. Whereas naturally, if the Americans were wiser, they wouldn't be in this situation. But fundamentally, there is this Israeli influence that is proving time and again to be unbelievably destructive at a scale that we cannot imagine.
Yes.
Because the wise strategy for the United States would have been to end the war with Ukraine, unsanction Russia, let Russia become a major supplier to South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines, etc., develop Australian resources, and use that in partnership with India to contain China, the old George Kennan strategy, which worked against the Soviet Union. But the kind of Christian patience and virtue that this strategy requires is no longer present in the United States, especially at the leadership level. And what you get instead is we'll bomb all of our enemies at the same time. And even as this war is happening, they want to accelerate weapons sales to Taiwan.
And they want to take over Cuba. And they're also withdrawing some of the air defenses from South Korea, which exposing also the South Korean national security in this case. And since you mentioned Israel, Firas Habibi, our moderator, who is, by the way, Lebanese, is asking you the question, does Firas believe Israel is a military base for the American empire, or did Israel co-opt the United States, since we are speaking about this particular case?
From the Pentagon's perspective, Israel is a base. politically speaking, the Israelis keep on co-opting American politics and American politicians constantly. And this wouldn't have happened without Israeli influence. This war would not have happened without Israeli influence. Because it was David Bernia of the Mossad who convinced the Americans that decapitating the leadership would lead to the overthrow of the Islamic Republic regime. And it was a phone call with Netanyahu that finally convinced Trump to give the go-ahead and inform the timing. Rubio said that the Israelis were going to do it, so we went along with them.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody in authority has pretty much said something to that effect. And even Trump in the Knesset said, the Adelsons paid me money, and so I recognized the Golan as part of Israel, and I recognized West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And then you have the Epstein files, which show a level of co-optation of American politicians that transcends parties. And then you have the AIPAC donations, which go to 94% of Congress. And you see somebody even like AOC basically deciding that actually she doesn't dislike Israel as much as she used to, because even she's been co-opted. Now she's a airhead, but she was supposed to be on the far left that would be against this kind of stuff, and she's been co-opted. So no, and you could see that also with the war resolution issue, because Rouhana and Massi were trying to bring about a vote to say, do you support a war with Iran? Because technically, constitutionally, you need congressional approval to do this.
Yes.
This is a war with zero legal cover within the United States. But the Democrats worked with the Republicans to make sure that there wouldn't be a vote, because they all supported the war, but were too terrified of voting publicly in support of the war and putting that on their record.
Yes.
And so this level of Israeli influence over American politics is overwhelming. And yes, it co-opts the United States.
And that is dangerous for the world.
And that is insane.
I'm really trying to follow up on the comments. We have received hundreds of comments. Many of you are happy with the analysis and appreciative of Firas. So if you like what he says and his analysis, this is his website, guys.
Thank you.
So modadgeopolitics.com. I have already put his... Yeah.
Modad with a A.
Modad.
That's the difference between being from the mountains and being from the Beqa'.
That's the price you pay when you're from Aleppo. By the way, the website, guys, is in the description below. I have already dropped it several times in the live chat. But once this stream is over, you can go to the description, click and follow his work and read his analysis, because this is where he is posting his professional geopolitical analysis. And I think the last article was from yesterday, Strategic Risk Brief Managing the Market. So you can also show support to independent geopolitical analysts like Firas. I think that would be highly appreciative. And since Firas comes from Lebanon, I would like to ask him about what Smotrich said. Smotrich yesterday was making some crazy statements again. I want to show the face of this guy carrying some map in his hands. So this is the guy, and he says, Smotrich said on the 23rd of March that Israel should annex largest swaths of southern Lebanon, extending its borders to the Litani River, as Israeli forces bombed bridges and destroyed homes in an ongoing military campaign. So this is the exact place where they wanted for Hezbollah to withdraw, right? The north of Litani. So they would allow Israelis to occupy southern Lebanon, basically.
Essentially. And the Lebanese army seems to have decided to be, at least the Lebanese authorities seem to have decided to be at least partly complicit. And Lebanon is in a very dark place right now. Now, mind you, Al-Hashd al-Sha'bi, the Iraqi Popular Mobilization Units, they negotiated a ceasefire whereby the Israelis would stop bombing Dahi in exchange for the the Hashid halting their attacks on the American embassy,
Mhm.
which was holding. And then the Israelis obviously tried to break it because all they want is more escalation. And then the Americans pulled out of the Victoria base in the Baghdad airport. And then they bombed, it seems, one of the guys that they were negotiating with and killed him, one of the commanders of the popular mobilization units in Anbar. The Israeli ambition now is to try to engage in a massive land operation, and they're talking about mobilizing 400,000 soldiers. In a population of 8 million Jews, this is insane. This is insane. This is 5% of the total population, and it's very unprecedented that you would try to mobilize something of this size. For Hezbollah, obviously they have survived the war better than I thought they had.
Me too.
Or at least they've recovered better than I thought that they could. And the loss of Syria seems to have really not affected their ability to recover. Whether or not their supplies hold out, whether or not they're managing their resupply properly, there are all kinds of questions that we don't understand at this stage because we don't have visibility on their logistics. But it seems that they're still able to move, and they're still holding the Israelis at Khiyam. The importance of Khiyam is that it commands a hill that is the highest location between the shortest distance between the Israeli border and the Litani. And so it serves to cut off Hezbollah, to cut off the Bekaa and the northern parts of the Bekaa, which is the Hezbollah, one part of Hezbollah's heartland, from South Lebanon, which is where the battlefield is. And they're blowing up the bridges in order to affect Hezbollah's resupply. And it seems that the Israelis have committed themselves to a long ground war. This is impossible economically for Israel without there being guarantees from global financiers that they are going to support Israeli debt and the Israeli shekel and guarantee reinvestment after the war ends. And so this is where the Epstein network plays a role, because Epstein was one network, but there are others. And these networks seem to be committed to helping Israel recover from this war and helping it expand its borders. So, and that should be said and factored into our calculation, because this is precisely the same oligarchic class that is responsible for the global financial crisis, that is responsible for the profiteering from COVID, that is responsible from every kind of war profiteering, and that injects the far left poison around transgenderism, around degeneracy, around OnlyFans, around all of that whoring around.
The guy that
And
just
that
died
backs.
yesterday.
Say again?
The guy died yesterday, the CEO
Yes.
of OnlyFans.
Yes, I heard.
Turned out to be the biggest financer of APAC.
May God judge him in his wisdom and mercy. We don't impinge on God's judgment. We don't speak about God's judgment. It affects us all. However, without these assurances from international capital, Netanyahu would not be in a position to do this, because the Israeli economy on a purchasing power basis is 1/4 the size of the Iranian economy. And so a few $1 billion from these oligarchs make a massive difference in Israel.
Yes.
And this should be said. Now, on the ground, the fact that Hezbollah is still holding out in Khiyam, given the fact that it was destroyed completely or almost completely in the previous war, shows that they have shifted their defensive tactics. And it appears that they have shifted from a static defense to a mobile defense. But I would argue also that this defense is going to be layered, and that every inch that the Israelis take is going to cost them massively. The Israeli thinking is that everywhere they take, they will send in sapper teams and just blow up everything and make sure nobody can return. That's the idea. And that is obviously a prelude to annexation.
Yes.
But the logic of this is inherently insane, because you keep expanding the border and taking other people's lands and then blaming the bastards that you've kicked out for fighting back and wanting to get back to their homeland. That's constantly the logic that animates the Israelis.
Yes.
How dare the Palestinians fight back against us? Well, why are they fighting back? All of Hamas's leadership are not actually from Gaza. But they're from Ashkelon, they're from Beersheba, they're from all of these other areas in the south of Israel that ended up getting expelled to Gaza. Where is the most vicious resistance against Israel in the West Bank coming from? Well, it's coming from the Jenin camp, not the Jenin city. It's coming from the camp near Jericho, not from Jericho city, etc., etc. And so the logic here is that we must keep expanding, and then how dare they fight against us? But on the ground, the advances are not that big, which is why the Israelis are going to commit 400,000 soldiers. They cannot commit those indefinitely. They cannot commit them without these financial guarantees that I would argue probably exist. And like the Epstein files, it will take something very dramatic for us to read about them. But committing 400,000 soldiers, if this fails, this becomes a disaster. So if this war ends and all the Israelis have gotten is a very narrow strip along the border, and then Hezbollah survives and Iran survives, they're in very deep trouble.
Yes, which realistically they're going to survive.
Which realistically, based on precedent, they will survive. But let's say they don't. The next step is to go up against the Sunni areas and to go up against Jordan and to expel the Palestinians from Gaza and from the West Bank.
So this is the Greater Israel Project.
This is the Greater Israel Project. But
so
that puts you in conflict with the Sunnis.
Yeah. I mean, what military means do they have in this case? They have tied their security with the American protection, basically, in the region. And will America protect them? Like when Qatar was bombed, America didn't fire any of its air defenses, and now they are operating their air defenses against the Iranian missiles.
Yes, of course.
What kind of signal this sends to these players in the region, basically? They need these players on their side.
Yes, but these are... I think Bashar al-Assad described them accurately. Half men. Right?
I didn't expect this from you. I didn't expect this from you, but...
because there is something fundamentally... I mean, I'm not one of those people calling for Islamic unity. I disagree with Islam full stop. I think it's false. But I also accept that people need to safeguard their interests and have prudence in terms of identifying threats. And indeed, this is why, as a Christian, I identify Islam as a threat. On the other side, I see their perspective, that this is an expansionist force that is committed to, I mean, Mike Huckabee said it, they can take it all.
He said, fine.
They can take it all. Fine, let them take it all. If you don't feel threatened by this, you have a bit of a problem. You have a bit of a problem. And Bibi is saying, I want to make Israel into a superpower. Well, the only way this can happen is to grow the territory of Israel massively and to solve the strategic depth problem, which is what the Greater Israel Project is at least partly intended to do. Yes. This is why they're expansionist, because they feel constantly a threat. Rightly so. Because Islam will never recognize a Jewish state. Full stop. Not in the Holy Land, at least. And so this conflict doesn't seem to have a breaking mechanism. And the fact that they just succeeded in drawing the United States into a war while also arguing that we should do Turkey next shows a level of extremism that is genuinely dangerous. That is genuinely dangerous. And they don't have a breaking mechanism. And they don't have any intention of trying to see the world through the eyes of the people that they're trying to displace or to attack. And then Hezbollah gets blamed because between 2006 and 2023, it didn't attack Israel. So why do you have weapons? Okay. Now they're using the weapons against Israel. Why do you have weapons you're bringing about Israeli attacks? Israeli attacks are going to happen. They want to expand the borders of the state. And it will happen at your expense. You being Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi, eventually Iraq. And so, and it's only possible through borrowed American power. And it's only possible.
What happens if the Americans withdraw from the region, or let's say decrease their military presence in the region? This is an existential threat then for Israel.
Which is why they must maintain their influence over American politics at all costs. Which is why you will have Larry Ellison talking to the Israeli ambassador in Germany about vetting Marco Rubio to decide whether or not he would support him. Which is why the Adelsons will offer Trump $250 million this time instead of $100 million. Which is why these donations happen. Which is why AIPAC exists.
Which is why probably Charlie Kirk has to go.
I don't know. I haven't seen evidence supporting that. I haven't seen evidence supporting that. But it does mean that this influence of the oligarchy over politicians is necessary for the existence of Israel. And if that influence fades, it instantly becomes an existential threat for the Israelis. And so if you're Netanyahu, what you're trying to do is build up Israeli territory and population enough in order to make Israel an independent power. That's the ambition. And if that means letting the world economy collapse, let it collapse.
Today, the Lebanese government, Firas, I have read this tweet of the foreign minister of Lebanon, and he says, I instructed today the Secretary General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Immigrants to summon the Iranian, the ambassador, the charge d'affaires in Lebanon to inform him of the decision to withdraw the agreement for the designated Iranian ambassador, Mohammad Reza Shibani, declare him persona non grata and request that he leave Lebanese territory not later than 29th of March of 2026. And at the same time, this is another tweet coming from, let me check. Yes, this one. Gideon Saar,
yes,
is the foreign minister of Israel, and says, I welcome the decision of the Lebanese foreign minister to expel the Iranian ambassador designate from Lebanon. This is a justified and necessary step against the state responsible for violating Lebanon's sovereignty for its indirect occupations through Hezbollah and for dragging it into war. We call on the Lebanese government to take practical and meaningful measures against Hezbollah, whose representatives still serve as ministers within. So they're also asking for the ministers to leave the government. And this is, we're talking about completely excluding Hezbollah from the political life as well. This is a recipe for what?
Civil war. Civil war. I mean, this is such a reckless thing to do. At least prudence dictates, which is a key Christian virtue, that you at least wait to see if the Iranians are going to lose the war. If they're going to lose the war, fair enough. I mean, Lebanon declared war on Germany in World War II. Go for it. No problem. I don't think the Germans were particularly worried about that declaration at the time. But sometimes you have to do things symbolically to sort of participate. And this is what allowed Lebanon to be a founding member of the United Nations. So fair enough, do it. But given that you have maybe a third of the population that is Shia, given that they are in the middle of an existential war for their homeland, given that you have no authority over them or ability to protect them, maybe be patient. Maybe the prudent thing to do is to be patient. You know the saying, عرق البحر والريح طلعت الفل بالمركب.
No.
The wind and the seas fought and the boat took the beating, obviously. Don't be the boat. Wait. Keep arguing what you've been arguing. Look, this is a terrible time. We want to assert sovereignty. We wish to disarm Hezbollah. We resent the participation in this war. We call for respect of international humanitarian law. Civilian assets are not being used by Hezbollah. Don't bomb them. These are war crimes. Do that. And the people who were doing that were doing it out of a position of realizing their actual strength and their actual capabilities. But now you have 1 million Shia and others who have been displaced, but largely Shia. Christians have been displaced, Druze have been displaced, Sunnis have been displaced, but the bulk are Shia. Provoking them now is the kind of thing that builds a massive amount of resentment for no obvious benefit, because the Israelis are also saying that we don't want to negotiate with Lebanon, and there's no reason to negotiate with the Lebanese government that can't physically disarm Hezbollah. And the Lebanese government cannot physically disarm Hezbollah because anything between a quarter and half of Lebanese soldiers are Shia, and they're not going to fight Hezbollah. The issue is that Lebanon is being pushed in a situation where it's being forced to make decisions. But the country is built on endless compromises and lies. That this is one people, which they aren't. That this is a functioning country, which it by definition cannot be. Which that the state matters, which it doesn't. And now is a time to try to maintain the facade a little bit and see where the chips fall before committing yourself. Committing yourself too early can end either in bloodshed or in humiliation. And it's not necessary. It's not necessary. And it's not like the Israelis are going to say, oh, now Hezbollah's gone, we're going to give you back these territories. They're not going to say that. What they're going to say is, now that Hezbollah's gone, what else can we take?
Yes. Northern Lebanon. Northern Litani River.
What more can we expand into? But there is sometimes the synergy between some of the Lebanese nationalists who want a Christian Mount Lebanon, and I don't blame them for wanting it. I would rather live in a smaller Lebanon because it will be more functional. But sometimes there is this synergy between them and the Israelis. And they try to make these compromises and say, well, this is understandable because it's necessary. When in reality, it's a very bad idea. I mean, the international support for Israel has never been lower. And support for Israel among the Western public has never been lower. And siding with it now doesn't seem like a wise policy choice. And notice, I'm not talking about the morality of it. I'm talking about the wisdom of it. I'm just talking about it in practical terms. So they're doing these things which are, how does this end? This ends in chaos. And then we go back to the 1970s and we ask the Syrians for help. But this time, instead of a secular, like the Assad family, relatively secular, sectarian, it's a long conversation, the exact nature of the Assad regime. But instead of getting that, we get literal head choppers. We get literal graduates of Islamic State and Al-Qaeda coming to keep the peace in Lebanon to do what? To protect the Christians. Just call for the return of the Ottoman Caliphate and be done with it.
Thankfully, for now, the Turkish side told the Jolani regime, this is a big gambling. Do not do it. This is a trap for you to begin with. They're putting the Jolani regime in the face of Hezbollah, which is basically the Jolani regime is overstretched in the country. It hasn't emboldened itself in Damascus. It's very vulnerable, and you're fighting against a competent army at the end of the day. So this could go south for the Jolani regime.
It could, if this fails, this could end Jolani, obviously. But remember, before the Houthi marched on Sana'a and then on Aden, which led to the Saudi 2015 intervention, and it was obvious that the Saudis were going to intervene, the Iranians told the Houthi, don't do it.
Yeah.
The Houthi did it anyway. And that escalated the civil war massively, and the Iranians were stuck having to back the Houthi. And eventually the Houthi forced a ceasefire on the Saudis after blowing up in Yanbu a major oil storage facility.
Yes.
Right? So sometimes just because the Turks said no doesn't mean that Jolani will listen. Because Jolani operates at the intersection of multiple intelligence agencies.
I agree.
That's why they were so bothered about cleaning up his image in the lead up to the fall of Assad. And there was this massive campaign to say, no, he's reformed, he's changed, he's a good man now, he's different. You know? And then the two creatures of the British establishment, what's his name? Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, went and interviewed Jolani in Damascus and tried to present the better image of Jolani. Then the pogroms against the Alawites happened, and the attacks on the Druze happened, and so on. So just because the Turks said no, his thinking can easily be, no, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to force the Turks to back me. Because that's the problem with proxies. Sometimes the tail does wag the dog. This is how Israel got the United States to fight Iran.
I hope you're wrong. I truly hope you're wrong in this.
I always hope I'm wrong. When I pray that I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, but for the good for Lebanon, because there is nothing left anyways in Syria to really try to fix. It truly needs complete restart in Syria, and we don't want for Lebanon to face this existential threat, because if Jolani intervenes in Lebanon, this is not going to be like the Syrian army. And those people are vicious. Those people are, and talking about the former Syrian army, those people are, as you said, graduates of the Islamic State or ISIS in Iraq and in Syria. And they have this inherited hatred towards the minorities in the region. It is permissible for them to kill based on identity, religion, ethnicity, and lots of things. And but Lebanon...
You can't forget, sorry to interrupt you, you can't forget that the American intervention in Iraq led to the decimation of Iraqi Christians.
Yes.
The intervention in Syria led to the decimation of Syrian Christians. And the last bastion of Christianity in the Middle East is Lebanon, dysfunctional as it is. And that would suggest that this one is going to be next.
Yes. And this will probably also create the conditions for Shia Christian probably alliance in this case against the mutual enemy. I'm not talking about the political class, but rather on the popular base. Under certain circumstances, this alliance could be revived.
I mean, on the popular base, the Christians are the only ones who live with every other community in Lebanon. All of the other communities segregate each other away from each other. The Druze and the Sunnah, the Shia and the Sunnah, they segregate themselves away from each other. But they all live with the Christians.
I lived in Lebanon for 5 years. I lived in a Christian era in Kura. And it was mixed in many places. And then you go to Tripoli, it is a little bit different. And Dahi is also a little bit different. Lebanon is such a unique country. I pray for Lebanon. It has been like the second homeland for me. This is where I started my so-called journalistic career. This is where I learned how to write articles. This is where I learned my first TV appearance was in Lebanon. Lebanon has given me the freedom. Lebanon has lots of freedom when it comes to journalistic work. So I think it was a great place also to start, at least the beginning of it. So it holds a great place in my heart. And my parents, actually, during the civil war, my father was in Lebanon, and then he fled from Lebanon to Syria. And part of our family stayed in Lebanon, and they become Lebanese. So my cousins and my father's cousins are also Lebanese. So I feel like I have also lots of belonging to that place. Let's hope this is what we can all do. Unfortunately, only pray for peace for the Lebanese people. And
Amen.
Amen. We cannot say anything else. Firas, my friend, thank you so much really for coming to the show today. We have had over 1 hour of conversation. Over 1,000 people were watching us live on Syriana Analysis. It was a great conversation with you guys. Since you're watching this, go to the description and also click on Modad's. Dad's, I'm so sorry for doesn't come from my throat, you know. Firas's website is in the description below. Go and follow him also, and what he does and what he writes also on his website. And if you like this stream, the easy thing to do to support this work, guys, just a thumbs up, like this stream, subscribe to Syriana Analysis, and only if you can and only if you want, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis, or there are different other means in the description below to support this independent work. Peace be upon you guys, upon your families, and peace be upon you, Firas, Habibi, and we will see you soon.
Habibi. See you soon.
Salam, guys.